Hello, everyone. So just give it maybe a minute or so and we will begin as people come in. Hello, August, and okay, some of these names I am not even going to try to pronounce. Yes, here we go, or here we are. This time is going to be a little bit different. I will explain shortly. How's it going? Mellow Manchito. That's probably completely butchered it. Wow. Oh, yes, I did. I thought I had it right for a second. So we're going to get started real shortly. Visual hierarchy. I'm going to spend probably 45 minutes to an hour talking about that. Can you believe that? That's a good question. I haven't even thought about that in 2 sentences. We'll see. I'm going to try to describe it momentarily. All right, we have 82 people here. It's been 2 minutes since we started, so I'm going to go ahead and switch things over. Don't screw it up, Gary. There we go. There I am. And then we're going to give our overlay here. Nice. All right. So basically today is the beginning of a new stream, a new type of stream. It's the very first one. I'm calling them a follow along or a project follow along, where every 2 weeks, and by the way, I am streaming weekly now, but you know, next week is going to be the usual live design review where you submit your designs and I just review them and critique them. But then the alternate week will be, which is what I'm doing today, is something that's going to be based on a certain topic as it pertains to front-end design / development, and maybe even in the future back-end stuff as well. So today it's design-oriented for sure, and we're going to talk about visual hierarchy, and this is something that I talk about all the time when I'm doing the live design reviews, because you know, it's something that new designers, new UI designers commonly get wrong, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on today, in describing what visual hierarchy is and then demonstrating, you know, what it is as well. So this, of course, this stream is sponsored, and all these future streams are sponsored by Skillshare, and you can see in the little overlay over here that you can get your first 2 months free, 100% free. You have to put in some type of payment, but those 2 months will be free. You can cancel before then if you wish. And today's topic is based on right here, this course, which is Visual Hierarchy and Spacing in Web Design. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about the concepts that are demonstrated in this course, but in a very rough manner. So what I suggest everyone do, even after watching this live stream, go ahead and take advantage of that offer from Skillshare for the free 2 months and watch this course. Every Skillshare course has a project that you can do. You can see there's 62 that other students have submitted based on what they learned. And I want you to do the project, and also come to my Discord server right here after you do the project, and you have a week to do this before the next stream, and I want you to submit your project right I guess we'll put it in our YouTube live chat right here. All right, submit your project in the YouTube live chat, and I will feature them at the beginning of next week's live stream using what you learned. All right, so take advantage of that. And so let's go ahead and get started. I want to I'm using Adobe Experience Design in this. You don't have to. You can use Figma, you can use Illustrator, you can use Photoshop. I don't even care. Maybe MS Paint wouldn't work out too well for this, but use whatever you're comfortable with. And I just want you to follow along as I do this. And that's what it's called, a follow along. And just sitting there watching somebody design something, that's more ideal than doing nothing, of course. But the way you really commit this stuff to memory, if you're a new designer, is to actually do it physically with your hands on the mouse and keyboard while watching. So hopefully, if you can, you have a second monitor, you can do this while you're watching this, or if you're watching this when you didn't watch it live, you can just go back and forth between windows. I want you to definitely follow along. It's going to help you for sure to really create awesome UI designs. All right, so I'm going to check the live chat, make sure everything is going well. All right, it is. I just want to make sure, like, hey, Gary, your audio isn't working. Okay, so first of all, what is visual hierarchy? So visual hierarchy is not specific just to UI design. I'm only focusing it on UI design in this context because it's relevant to the, the type of stuff that we do on this channel. I do web designs and app designs and coding as well. So visual hierarchy is something, like I said, I talk about often, and it's basically a way of prioritizing the different elements that exist on your UI design, and you are emphasizing them through visual aesthetics in a sense. So this could include categories such as spacing, like your margin and padding. It includes color and contrast. It includes a different topography. It can include animation, and this is all stuff that's covered more in depth in that Skillshare course. All right, so what we're going to do here, I'm going to make this artboard real long. So their height right now is 1080. I'm going to make it like 4000. And also to get rid of this viewport height, I'm going to make it 4000 as well. No, not 400, 4000. There we go. All right, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to start just with a 2-column layout, and all the principles I'm showing you are going to apply to whether it's 1 columns or 3 or 4 columns. But just for now, we're going to start with the 2-column layout. And on the right side, I'm going to have a photograph. All right, so we're going to really try to make this a really professional looking contemporary style of a UI slash layout. So I'm going to get rid of the border here, and I'm going to use an Adobe XD plugin called Photosplash. So if you don't have it, just go to Discover Plugins, assuming you're using XD, of course, and type in Photosplash, and then just install it here. And the way you use it, we go to Plugins, we'll go to Photosplash. All right, and you could do a keyword search up here, or you could just do random stuff. All right, so for me, let's see here. Oh, I like that. Okay, we got a wolf. Okay, so it's just a quick and easy way. This plugin allows you to just get assets in rather than having to go to the browser and search, whatever. So this is a 50-50 2-column layout. And let's say for this particular, maybe this is a client that you're designing for or yourself, you want to have a subtitle, a heading, and a paragraph. All right, so this is where visual hierarchy as it pertains to type is so important. So we're going to put it in this section right here. All right, so first we're going to start obviously with the type tool, and I'm just going to put in the title, and it's just going to be something random. And in fact, the way I'm going to do this title is I'm just going to draw out, left click and drag an area right around here, and notice the amount of padding that I'm giving, or white space I'm getting from the left of this element and the right of this element. You don't want them up close. All right, so I'll just type in something like enjoy the forest. Let me think. Enjoy the forest with the wolves. So stupid. All right. So I'm going to increase this. So we have it on roughly about 2 lines. All right. And for this, I really want to make it modern. And make it feel like it's a very high class. So I'm going to use a serif font called Playfair. Playfair Display. Just look at that. I love this font. and I'm going to take the contrast and make it maximum by making this black. Now, if you want this font, just go to Google real quickly and type in Playfair font download, and the first result I think is this, the font squirrel, and just download the TTF right here. You don't have to log in or anything, and install it. All right, you don't have to use this font, of course. Okay, so here's our headline, and if you want, you can adjust the line height. I'm going to bring it up just a bit, and the next element that we have, and this is where visual hierarchy starts to come into play in relation to type. The next element that we need to have could be either, we could place the paragraph here or a subheading like right underneath it, or we could put it on right on top. But we need to separate these elements visually, and that's what visual hierarchy is. So for instance, let's take this. I'm going to duplicate it with Control D, and let's say up here we're going to put a subheading, and the subheading doesn't necessarily have to be a typical subheading. It could be like the date it was posted. I'll just say posted on July 12th, 1983. That's ridiculous. That's my birthday, by the way. So the first thing, before I make any changes to it, we have two elements here. Think of these as different elements, and clearly this looks horrible. It doesn't make sense, but why doesn't it make sense? Because both of these are of the same exact characteristics in terms of the font, in terms of the height, and your eye doesn't know where to look. And that's what visual hierarchy is. We have to separate it, and we have at our disposal multiple elements or multiple categories to separate these things visually. All right, so the first thing I want to do right off the bat is to change the size. The scale is like one of the easiest ways to really reinforce and create a consistent and strong representation of visual hierarchy on your designs. So let's scale this down quite a bit. All right, so I have it at 26. And up here, you could actually maybe put it way up here if you wanted to. And we'll experiment once we have all three of the elements on here in terms of position, because again, position is another, and spacing is another element that you can use for visual hierarchy. Let's just put it right here actually for now, just for now. So the only thing we changed is just the scale, and we can see it works much better because we know it's obviously more important the title of the story as opposed to the date, right? So let's take this, we'll duplicate it and drag down, and we'll put in just some lorem ipsum text, and that is another plugin that I have here that you can just go to Discover Plugins, type in lorem, and you'll get this plugin right here. And I'm just going to put this one, the quick lorem ipsum trim height. All right. So now we have some. Let's remove that that line height there. All right. So if we leave it just in and of itself like this, obviously the font size is the same. These two elements are exactly the same. It's not ideal. I think we can change this up even more so to reinforce. These three different elements will have their own different unique characteristics about them. So right off the bat, I think it's a little bit difficult to read this type, and so this is where we're going to try mixing font styles. So we have right now everything is just serif. Let's switch to something that is just sans serif. Let's try something like, we could use Montserrat if we want. I'm going to try Source Sans Pro. And this is another font that you can download for free. And I think we're also going to change the type or the subheading as well to the same font. You don't have to, but this is just something that I want to do. Okay, so right now we do have visual hierarchy sort of working, but looking at it, I think we could separate it even more so using some of those different categories that make up visual hierarchy. We've used scale. We've changed the type. Let's also change, I think we will change the color here as well. So, or in this case, it's going to be the contrast. Right now it's maximum contrast, but I think I want to separate these elements from the title just a little bit more. And so the way we'll do that is take these two elements and we'll take the fill and we'll go down just a little bit right around the hex code is 545454. And I also think the line height here can be separated out in a little bit further. So I'm going to take the line height and increase it. And it makes it easier to read. And we also have the space. If this is the amount of text that we have to work with and we have this massive area here, then we can go ahead and increase the line height like that. So I think this is pretty good, but we can actually adjust things a little bit further by working with positioning. So we could put possibly the subheading or the date or whatever you want to call this, it was posted up here. You could even try putting it up here. You could take these two elements and they're their own block. You can put them right here. There's a lot of different ways you could do this, and there's really not a way that is most ideal over the other unless you do testing and you have traffic, and you could do A/B split testing to see which of these positions yields greater results if you do have a specific goal in mind, if they're trying to get them to click on a call to action or something. But still, as long as you mind these principles, then you'll be good. And what I'm talking about principles is the visual hierarchy element, and also I want you to think in spacing as well, the white spaces. So the way we need to think about things like this, in this course that I'm recommending everybody check out at Skillshare, it goes into depth about this. But think of everything in terms of blocks. So I'm just going to put out a block here. Let's get rid of the fill. I'm going to increase the size. We're just going to make this something that really sticks out, like blue. All right, so this is a block here. This is also a block. It's our two columns. And we can also think in terms of blocks with the elements inside of them. So when I select this in and of itself can be a block, or depending on how you structure these two elements, these can be a block, and then this is kind of separate. But altogether, these are blocks as well, these three elements. And when it comes to your spacing and your white space, or your padding in this case, inside of this block, you want to give things room to breathe. What I see often that new designers get wrong is they will take maybe this type and they'll push things real close to the edge. And if you have a ton of content or a ton of type that you have to get in there, that's generally, there's no other way about it. But sometimes people will put things right to the edge, and it just throws off the design. It makes it, I refer to it as giving your elements room to breathe. So you want to make sure, and the author from that course, he has a specific lesson in there refers to as usually as a general rule of thumb when it comes to your containers and types inside of it. You delegate about 60% of the container, the width of the container, for the type, and then on the sides 20% and 20% over here roughly. So like I mentioned before, definitely take that course so you can get a more in-depth look at it. So the way I'm going to position this ultimately, I'm going to get rid of that container up here. We could start up here, and then we have a lot of white space down here. We could take everything and maybe put it to the bottom of the container if we wanted, and I think that's what we'll do. All right, so if you're following along, hopefully you are, because like I mentioned, it's going to help. Then go ahead and try to get to this point. You can pause if you want as well. It's not a big deal. And then we're going to continue on, and I want to continue on with this design and try to give you some different looks and different ideas about potential layout scenarios. So let me check out the chat, see why do I have 280,000? I don't know why I do. I've been doing this for like forever. I have like 530 videos or something. All right, cool. All right, so let's continue on. So what I'll do now is we're gonna take this same picture. I'm gonna duplicate it. I'm gonna put it right here. But except we're obviously not gonna have the same picture. Let's go back to Photo Splash here. All right, and let's just put in another one. Oh, that's perfect. It's another like woodsy photo. I love that plugin. All right, so now let's say the next, in terms of prioritizing the content and what's important, you know, we have the headline and a little bit of a paragraph here. Now let's say the next thing that we want to put in is some type of quote from some person. Maybe it's from this person in a photograph. Where could we put a quote? Well, you might think we could just stick it right here, right? We could put it here, and that would work. But if you really want to make the design more unique and interesting, you have other options available that you can use. You don't always have to think in just concrete blocks that this has to be here and nothing can go over it or whatever. So what I decided to do, or I think I will do, is we're going to put in a rectangle. Roughly right around here. All right, and I'm going to get rid of the stroke. And we'll experiment with the position of this, but this is just going to be a single quote, and it's going to be kind of large type, I think. And we're just going to put it right on top of this container, or this photograph. And especially with this photograph that I chose, it works because there's no focal point in or important area. There's nobody's eyes or heads up there. We're not cutting off heads or anything, just the tree, and it will work quite well. So if we're talking about positioning this container, would it make sense to put it right here? Well, what I'm looking at is this element right here, this photograph. And notice how we have this amount of white space or spacing on the left, this padding, but we have maybe half that space up here, and that kind of throws it off in my opinion. So I might just push it down so that it's roughly even in terms of the white space from the top of this container to the left of here. Now, I may adjust that and experiment, because that's ultimately what you need to do. Experiment with placement big time. Now I'm going to take the type tool and we're going to put a quote. All right, so for the quote, I think I'm just going to put in, let's see here. Got rid of that by accident. We'll use Lorem Ipsum again, the plugin. And we're going to make this large. Maybe not that large, but we're going to come down. I'm going to use that the title font, Playfair. I can't say that font name for some reason. Something like that, and I think we'll use the italic version. All right, and I don't want it to be quite this much type, maybe right around here. And we'll put quotes around it. And we'll take down the opacity, maybe right around there. Now I'm also going to put in like a quick author's name of sorts, and so let's take this down. And so now we're dealing with visual hierarchy again, because we have two elements, right? We have the type, we have the quote itself, and then we have to put somewhere, you know, the person's name of the quote to attribute them. So where could we put this? And what size should it be? And what type should it be? It could be the same. What color and contrast would it be? Well, we can already see up here we've established sort of a pattern with how we're dealing with a main sort of type up here when it's using that serif font, and also a subheading sort of section. So these two elements are kind of related to what we're doing here with the larger element that's based on the serif font, and then a little subheading, which is going to be the person's name. And when it comes to consistent or UI design, you want to be consistent. It just makes the overall composition much more appealing to look at. So I'm going to put in just a dash here and then John Doe. Now, the type looks bad for that. Obviously, we've not worked in any of that visual hierarchy that's so important. So let's start doing that. Let's first change it to Source Sans Pro, which is our sans serif font. And then we'll scale it down. All right. I don't like the J of this Source Sans Pro, but we'll deal with it. We'll have to live with it. We'll make it bold. What size is this, by the way? It's 26. This is 26. All right. Now, right here, I'm trying to think if I like that. Yeah. I think we definitely do need to reinforce the visual hierarchy through color and contrast with these two elements. We did size, we did typeface. Let's do color and contrast as well. We could either make this like near black or black itself, and that would work. Or we could keep it kind of around this mid area, and we could either make this, you don't want to go too much lighter than what we have going on here. Simply because people won't be able to see it. Certain people, due to color blindness and all of that good stuff, will not be able to see it. So going even this light for this element right here would be too light. Don't go that light when it comes to a background that's light or white like this. If we're going to use this color, which is sort of a mid-gray, I think we might go a little bit darker. Then we'll make this one a little bit lighter. And so now we can see we've created a good separation between these two type-based elements, which of course is visual hierarchy. All right. So where does this end and where does that end looking at this? So it's a little strange having this big container or this rectangle kind of cutting in, and then we don't see anything over here. We could further reinforce that through, let's see here. I guess we'll take another rectangle, and in CSS I guess we could say this would be like a drop shadow that we could implement, and we'll make this, and we could have also done it with the drop shadow here. That would make more sense. Let me do it that way. I'm doing things inefficiently. So we're gonna have a shadow here. We're gonna take the blur is gonna be 0. Hopefully oh yeah, you can't really see it because I'm in the way. Yeah, the B or the blur is 0. We're gonna have the X is the one that's going to be higher. Nope. Sorry, the Y, I mean, coming down. Maybe right around there. Kind of like that. And then if you want to adjust the opacity, you can. If you want it to be quite light, like that. All right, so I like that. Yeah, that's good. All right, so let's say we also have a requirement of maybe having something in this area, which would make sense. And this time, maybe we'll just have 2 elements, and we'll just repeat this over here. We'll duplicate this. And remember, spacing, very important. What's the next element that we need to consider when we're spacing this block right here? Well, it's this section right here. And more specifically, really, it starts right here because we have an element that has a horizontal line that's going across. So we could space it in different areas. We could put it maybe up here. We can, once again, line it to the bottom. And that would be ultimately more consistent with how the overall design looks at this point. And also, because we only have 2 elements here instead of 3, because it works this way because we're separating them. These are their own elements, and this is so far down. I think we could probably get away with putting this just down here like that. And again, some of this is subjective, but I'm really just trying to focus on what's objective. So I think I like that. And if you want to do something, you can break these rules a little bit. If you really want to try to give it more of how would I say it, a graphic appearance, or you're doing things that are more unique, you can break these rules. So for instance, we have a quote here, and sometimes you'll see this when it comes to quotes. Let me just put in a quote right here. I'm going to make this large. And I'm going to change, I'm just going to cycle through with my down keyboard key here. down arrow rather. Try to find a good looking, oh God, I'm not going into those ones. A good looking sort of quote, a double quote rather. Well, I'm not going to sit here too long doing that. What we could do is, no, that's horrible. I am going to try to change it up to get a better one. I have some horrible double quotes here. Jeez, what is going on? We'll just use this one. What you can do is you can have maybe like a large quote right here. And this in and of itself wouldn't work simply because there's too much contrast. And obviously we're going real close to the container, which, like I said before, wouldn't make sense for your primary content, especially if it's something people need to read. But if we take it down, the opacity, it looks 1,000 times better, and it adds something to your design that's sort of interesting. I don't like that quote, but I'll leave it there so you can get the gist of it. All right, so I'm going to check the chat and make sure everything is going well. We're at 31 minutes. All right. So again, if those of you who are joining this stream after I began, this project that I'm doing is based on visual hierarchy and a Skillshare.com course that you can take for free if you join using my code that's overlaid on the other side of the screen here. And that is right here, visual hierarchy and spacing in web design. So it's a full course that's going to give you a lot more information, more structured information about visual hierarchy in web design. So I'm just giving here my own take on it. And so, especially if you're a new designer, watching just one tutorial or stream isn't going to cut it. You need to continually try to focus on the areas that you're struggling in. And when it comes to UI design, I think one of the biggest things new designers struggle with is this idea of visual hierarchy and spacing. All right, so let's continue on, and I'm going to put in a section. Let's say, for instance, we want to have another 2 columns, except for this time we're not going to have a photograph. Maybe we will have an area where we capture emails for like a newsletter or something. Now again, we want to try to, when it comes to good UI design, you want to keep consistent. You want to keep consistent across multiple areas in design. You want to keep consistent with your use of type, your use of color and contrast, and your overall style and spacing as well. So having said that, let's put in a label here. I think we'll put in something like get the latest news. And yes, I know that looks entirely much too large. Let's go ahead and scale that way down. And that's not the type we're using. We're going to use play fair. All right. Well, first of all, what I could do is just take this and duplicate it. And I'll type in, get the latest news. All right. And so for this section, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what are the most important pieces of content so far in this design? We have our headings right here. We have the type here. We have the quote. And get the latest news. Is this as important as the titles of these different sections of content? I would say no. So I'm going to scale this down. So the way we've enforced that visual hierarchy on these less important elements is through scale and those other areas that I talked about. So we'll scale this down, something to right around here. And what you want to do if you're dealing with a serious project that has a lot of different artboards, you want to use the assets section over here where you can add in the colors that are associated with your design, the character style specifically. So if you click over here and you click add character style, it's going to add this style so that you can easily change it across multiple areas and just change it in one section without having to do a lot of legwork. All right, so that's just a quick tip there for Adobe XD. So get the latest news. I think that's good right there. And again, we're thinking about blocks when you're spacing things out. This right here is a block. All right, so if we're thinking about how to space this, I'm looking at the left and the top and making sure that they're even. All right. So now under here we'll have like a text field of some sort, and there's a lot of different ways you could take this. A lot of that's subjective, as long as you're adhering to good design fundamentals. So I think what we'll do is make a real minimal sort of area. Maybe, let's see, maybe it'll just have a single black line, and we'll have placeholder text, which of course is all achievable in HTML using the placeholder attribute. And I'll put in here using the Source Sans Pro font, which is the sans serif font. We'll put in enter your email. All right, so here we go with visual hierarchy as it pertains to type once again. This would not make sense because you want the eye to first see get the latest news, and because that's the most important element in this particular block right here. So enter your email should not be the same in all facets. So through visual hierarchy, we're going to change it again. So, and once again, we want to be consistent by using the same type elements and apply them in much the same manner. So I'm going to delete that real quick just because it's a little bit redundant to keep on typing that stuff. And I'm going to duplicate this subheading up here. So let's change that up again. I'm going to put in enter your email. All right, right around there. And look at that already. So we changed it. We changed this up quite a bit, obviously. Again, it's a different type, it's a different size, it's less in size, and it doesn't contrast as much. So it creates a separation visually between these two elements, and that essentially is visual hierarchy. So I think right around there is pretty good. Again, you also have to consider when you're thinking about spacing, you don't just consider spacing from the outside elements, but also between the elements themselves. I see a lot of new designers push things up too close, and it's like, oh, come on, man, why would you do that? You got to give things room to breathe. So that looks pretty solid right there. And then we'll put a very simple call to action button. And another thing that's a part of consistency in establishing sort of design aesthetics is when it comes to buttons, do you want rounded corners, or do you want like that, or do you want it to be straight up just squares, you know, with no border radius? A lot of times new designers will try to work in border radiuses. They'll put in drop shadows, they'll put in glows simply because they can, and they think more is better, but it's usually opposite of that. I'm not saying that, you know, rounded corners are always a bad thing. Here, it's a subjective preference. But if you're going to apply it in one area, you need to apply it in others. And one reason I would use these more of a square approach with right angles is because we do see right angles all over the place here already with no border radiuses like in the photographs. So that's why I would use just a straight up square like this, or a rectangle rather. So let's make this just black. And we're already establishing sort of a color theme with this, and this is really monochromatic outside of the photographs themselves. So I think straight up black would be a good call to action button color because it does stick out. There's no other black on the page that's, you know, that encompasses this much space. So in terms of having a good call to action, this works perfect. So let's just put a type or a button label here. I'm just typing get it now, make this white for maximum contrast, scale this down. And one consideration we have here now is, do we want to use this serif font for the label, or do we want to use Source Sans Pro? I think I probably want to use Source Sans Pro for that. It just makes it a little bit easier to read, I think. All right, so another thing that you may be wondering to yourself is, if we're thinking in terms of a container and blocks, and we're spacing things inside of them in terms of padding, let's get rid of that fill, then shouldn't we move this section or this button, rather, like this. And then maybe over here, remember this is going to be 2 columns. This is going to be 1 column, and then there's a column over here. Perhaps over here we're going to have some type of descriptor or something about to get the latest news or something like that. We're going to duplicate this. We'll put it in, and it might be just a couple sentences about what they're going to receive over here. You could also put this underneath. It might make more sense, but really I'm just trying to fill out the space over here. Something could go over here. So you could do it like this, but I ultimately think if we scaled this back out to right here, it still works. And the reason it works is because we don't have a definitive edge that's clearly defined right here in and of this container, but we do up here. And bringing out the edge of this button to that edge works still. So you can definitely play around with the padding as long as it works and things still have room to breathe. You can see this Get It Now button. It's not too close to this type. And really it's just kind of acting in the same manner and vertically and space-wise as this image up here. So I think it works quite well. All right, so I think we're going to do one more section, and then we'll conclude this live feed. So let me just, I'm going to save this off screen here, check out the chat, make sure everybody's still hanging there. We'll do post. Oh, it was Source Code Pro. Of course, Source Code Pro. That's why it was looking different. I was wondering, I was like, damn, that J looks strange. Source Sans Pro. Yeah, that would annoy me too if that were you. So thank you for pointing that out. All right. All right. So, all right. Hopefully you guys have been following along with this. Of course, you can just pause if it takes too much time, or if I'm going too quickly. Because again, it's going to help you commit this stuff to memory by doing it rather than just sitting there watching me. I know it's a pain to have to do it, and especially if it's just for the purpose of learning. I mean, who likes doing that? But trust me, it's going to help you big time, more so than just watching. So the final thing we'll do, everything we've been dealing with right so far has been like kind of 2 columns and such. Let's do 3 columns underneath there. So how will we work in 3 columns, and what will it be? So like what type of content will it represent? Well, when it comes to landing pages, when you're working with maybe 3 or 4 columns of content, you can't have whatever it is inside of those elements to be like a ton of type or anything. So a lot of times it'll be just kind of quick little tidbits of information that feature that may go into detail about different aspects of the service or whatever the page is about. And sometimes they'll have icons that accompany them with just maybe a couple sentences underneath. So we'll have 3 columns and we'll do that. So right now there's a lot of white, and we know we're not going to be using another photograph down here. So one way you can separate your different sections of content is by color. All right, so we're going to take a container right around here, and we're going to separate it very lightly. Just, what was that color code? It was F2, 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 right around here. Now, one of the things that you should be aware of when you're working with this, I'm looking right now at the overall spacing of this block of elements around this container right here, this block. So you can see it's uneven. There's less space at the top than there is at the bottom. So we can adjust that in multiple ways. I think the best way to adjust that would possibly be to perhaps move this over or down. I think right here we have an even amount of space between the left and right, so we want to have an even amount of space between the bottom and right as well. So we need to move this up just a bit. All right, so actually one area that I've screwed up on, I just noticed, is look at where this type right here, look how much white space there is here. And then let's come down here and just draw that sort of line, and look how much the get the latest news is in. So that's inconsistency, and we don't want that. So what we'll do is I will take this. We're just going to group them so I don't have to select everything individually. Okay. Right there is where it should be ideally. Oops. And what we'll do now is just bring this in. So now that it's lined up to the left, this element should be like right around here. And then this one can come down now. Yeah, right around there. There we go. Much, much, much better. Yeah, I screwed that up there. I wasn't really paying attention to the top. So that's why consistency in all these different elements, especially spacing, as we just saw, is very important. It'll help just, even on a subconscious level, help people understand that it'll be a great design, or it is a great design. All right, so down here, getting back to this, we're going to have 3 sections of content. There's a lot of different subjective ways to go about it. One's not more right than the other in many cases, but as long as we adhere to those good, solid design fundamentals, then we should be able to do it quite well. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just start with the type-based section first. One of the things that can help you, by the way, when you're dealing with a lot of columns to help organize them is to take the artboard here in Adobe XD and turn on the grid layout. By default, it's at 12 columns with a 16 gutter width and 122 column width. All right. And if we have 3 columns, we know that they'll need to occupy 4 columns, but they don't necessarily have to expand all the way out to 4. In fact, you don't want that because there won't be enough white space. I'll do that though, just to show you as a demonstration how bad it ends up looking. So I'm going to go ahead and, wow, look how close I got to that left column without even seeing it. I got lucky there. Let's put in lorem ipsum text here real quick. And we're going to go to our plugin. I'm just going to put right there. All right, so this is 4, and I'm going to center align these. And you can experiment, of course, without, maybe just left aligning them. We don't want this to be bold, so we're going to set this to regular. And just for right now, let's say we want this to be like right around there. We'll say this is good. We'll duplicate it. We'll put it into the next section, and then the next section here. And let's get rid of the blocks here, or the grid, so that we could see what this looks like, and it's not going to be good. This is not as bad as I thought it would be, actually, because we do have some white space between these elements, but it's not enough. You really need to give things more room to breathe when it comes to type-based information that people need to read. So if people need to read stuff and you have multiple elements or multiple type elements that they need to read, you want to bring them in much more. So let me show you a better way of doing that. Just take the repeat grid tool and just drag this out. And of course, well, I'm not sure what the toggle button, if there is a toggle button for the grid. I should learn it if there is. I got almost perfect here. All right. So what we can do is then double click on any of these and hold Alt and scale them in. And you want something more like this. All right. So coming back out here, that looks much, much better in my opinion. There's a lot more space between these elements. All right. So we could also have an icon. And in terms of visual hierarchy, as it pertains to something like this, we don't want to separate these elements because we're giving them equal importance or equal priority. All right. So let's get some icons here. We can go to iconfinder.com. I think there's a plugin actually you can use for XD. I haven't used it yet though. And we could just type in, I don't know, lock. It's not going to be relevant based on our design. We can also choose free and then license type of no link back. And I'm just going to choose a nice outline based thing. We'll do this SVG right here. So the SVG will download. You can open it up in your Explorer or Show in Folder. Of course, that has to show up. And then we'll drag it somewhere off screen. Increase the size. All right, so this is also a visual hierarchy right here because we have two elements. We have an icon and we have a type. How important is an icon as opposed to the type? It's not as important, obviously. It's there as just kind of a quick visual reference. So the size, it definitely shouldn't be like this. I see a lot of designers screw this sort of thing up where they make the icons just real big. Unnecessarily big, and they're giving it so much importance. I mean, it's really not that important if we're talking about the type that accompanies it. And that's the most important stuff that people need to read, right? So we're going to reinforce the visual hierarchy through changing the scale and also possibly the stroke color as opposed to the contrast here, right here. So right here, this type is of a dark gray. You might want to make it a little bit darker because this isn't completely white, this background's on, so the contrast isn't quite as much. And then the color of this, we could see maybe right around there would work. We'll experiment with it just a bit. I'm not sure if I like this quite yet. I think it's fine right here, around here. I think through scale alone and position and putting it up will work quite all right. Yeah, okay. Let me just take this and replicate it a couple times. I am going to make it just a bit lighter, just to separate these out too a little bit more. So I'm going to take this. We will repeat the grid. Right around there looks good. I'm not going to bother at making these unique. You can if you want. And remember your spacing. We have this container here, and you want to make sure that you have equal spacing from the top to the bottom, and left and right. And it looks like this should come in just a bit, looking from this section to this section. And of course, if you want to be absolutely certain, which you should be, you can get out guides and such to ensure all that stuff is equal. I'm going to pull this down just a bit right there. And then you could leave it like this, but you can also, again, you can hack things a little bit and make them more interesting visually. So what we could do is we could take a container here, like a rectangle or square of some sort. We'll leave a stroke here. And you can get unique with this. You can just do different things and play around as long as you make the contrast not so significant most of the time. For instance, we could just put a container in here for each three of these. That would maybe just be too unnecessary, but if you are not unique enough, but if you want to be different, you could do something like this and make some sort of JavaScript based hover effect where it's like a parallax when you hover over them. Let's take the opacity down and stroke up just a bit. Where's the stroke? There we are. So the thicker you make the opacity, the more, or the thicker you make the stroke, the more you'll have to take down the opacity generally. I mean, you can experiment, by the way, just by going all black to see how that works, but personally, I don't like that. I think it draws too much attention to the frame itself. So I'm going to come down. You could try doing white as well, maybe adding a stroke or a drop shadow or a text shadow, not a text shadow, but a box shadow onto this and see how that looks. But I think it's just going to go slightly darker than this background here, but it's still barely quite not noticeable, but it gives it an interesting look. And you can break those roles as long as, in terms of padding and spacing inside containers, and we can break outside of the container as long as what you're doing doesn't conflict too much with what's happening in other areas. So this over here, I may not want to make that quite as... I'm off-centering it just a little bit. Let me delete that one. Something almost sort of like that. I think I have the these things off just a bit. Nonetheless, it's an interesting look that you could further experiment with. And that right there is it. All right, so let me save this. We'll get up closer just so we can get a good look of what's happening here. So again, we have visual hierarchy applied to these three elements. We can see they're all quite different on their own. Even though right here we have another way to enforce visual hierarchy, of course, is through text transform CSS property or all uppercase letters. And that's one way you can separate items visually. We could see it more so here. And again, you could experiment with placement and it would still work in other areas as long as you're not doing funky stuff like that, or like this, or like this. You don't want to do stuff like that. You have to give things room to breathe. But you could still play around with this. That would work. This could possibly work right here. So you have options, just as long as you're adhering to the basic fundamentals. So over here, we saw that we have like a little watermark that we applied. Again, everything's spaced out. We're separating things visually through type, color, size, scale, and all of that good stuff. So in the end, it comes to create a nice sort of composition that feels very consistent and works quite well. All right, so it has been 57 minutes. That's perfect. All right. I'm going to just check the chat out here a little bit because I haven't been reading them. So let me pop out the chat. I'll get to this in a second, being that we're about to conclude. What I want you guys to do now, if hopefully you followed along, and if you didn't, hopefully you can watch maybe later and follow along. And definitely check out the sponsor, which is Skillshare. And this is the course that I'm recommending people try out after you join for your free 2 months using my link right there on the side of the screen in the description of YouTube. Follow this course, and it's going to really outline much more so what I'm talking about, or what I was talking about in the stream, kind of off the cuff, in a more organized manner. And then follow the projects. There's a class project, and these are all the user submissions. And I definitely suggest taking that and doing the project. And in the next week, if you do the project and you go to my Discord server, which is right here, and go to YouTube live chat, post a screenshot or a URL or whatever to that project, and I will feature and I'll go through the projects on next week's live stream. All right, so the first step in order to be able to do that is to just join up here. It's for free for 2 months at Skillshare. Take the course and then do the class project and then submit it, and then I will feature yours and do a quick critique of them on the next week's live stream. My throat is like dying practically here. All right, so I'm going to check out the chat here a little bit. Okay, so we had quite a bit of text here. Right click, show hide grid. All right, thank you. I'm just going through this. All right, cool, guys. I'm going to check out my other section here. Yeah, so next week we'll do the live design review, and then 2 weeks from then we'll do another different project follow along, and you guys can submit your ideas for that if you want. All right, nobody's talking. Yeah, I kind of, I don't feel high energy today either. Going to a water park in 2 days. All right. All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing your projects, by the way, too. Post them in the YouTube live chat, and I will see you guys, next week. And also, obviously, I'm going to be having tutorials throughout next week as well before the live stream. All right, I will see you guys later.